Good morning, class. I thought I would talk a little bit about what persuasive writing is as it relates to our next essay. That's going to be due in less than 2 weeks. Hopefully, over the last week or so, you have downloaded the assignment file to see uh, the basic requirements, the parameters for that particular persuasive paper. You do have a list of topics to choose from. Realize that this is not your research paper. That's going to be the next essay that we talk about. I'm going to give you some information about really the first component of the research paper, because research paper basically during the following month, the next month, is what's going to sort of dictate the rest of our semester. It has, two other components with it. So be on the outlook, be on the lookout for information about research paper topics, stuff about the proposal, which is the first sort of component of the research paper, and the annotated bibs, which I want to sort of break up in sections since I find that that's a little easier when it comes to online classes. But our purpose for today is to look at persuasive writing and look at some of the techniques that you can use to not only get, if you need 5 pages for this particular paper or 1,250 words, whatever the parameters are, that you're able to get that. So if you look over here, if you're able to look over here, hopefully you'll be able to see the screen. Notice too that we're able to break out the wording here to basically, the P, the power of 3, E, emotive language, R, rhetorical questions, S, say it again, U, undermine opposing views, A, antidote, D, direct address, E, exaggeration. So a little poem here, taking the words or the letters of persuade and making a little poem, but it's basically kind of telling you what you can kind of do throughout. These are sort of persuasive techniques that you can use. Involve your audience by speaking to them directly, using personal pronouns, shared experiences, questions to get your audience thinking that don't answer a question, right? Sort of like the rhetorical questions there. Include little stories to illustrate your point. Destroy and criticize the opposing argument. This is really good if you can do this. Depending on your topic, you want to sort of destroy or criticize what, if you have sort of like a pro and con, well, what are other people saying about the cons? Can you destroy them? Can you refute them? To make your persuasion better. The other thing is be over the top to get your point across. You want to be careful there that you're not going too over the top, that you're not going in, multiple directions to sort of persuade your audience. So I would be, depending on your topic, I would be careful about doing this. You see this a lot when you think of persuasive writing. Think of politicians. It doesn't really matter where whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, independent, as we get close to midterm elections, which is basically in about a month away, you hear a lot of these radio ads, you read a lot of ads, maybe in print, you see a lot of ads on TV or on the internet. They're trying to persuade you to vote one way or the other. You see that a lot in, the political atmosphere, especially around election years. You also see this in advertisement just in general, billboards, magazines. They're trying to sell you a product, radio ads, online stuff that you see on your social media accounts. Everywhere that you turn, there's somebody or something trying to persuade you to either vote for them, to go out and support them, to buy this particular product. And, in a lot of ways, sometimes you have that power of voice as well when you're talking to friends and colleagues and family members about a certain particular product. or a certain particular candidate or a certain particular book or movie or food. You're trying to persuade them maybe to try this particular food or this restaurant, or you're trying to persuade them to go out and watch this particular, spend $20 or whatever it is to go to the theater and watch this movie. You want to use words, phrases, imagery that arouse an emotional response. Now we're going to talk a little bit, if you sort of go back into the era of Aristotle, you're going to know, you probably heard these. There's logos, which appeals to logic. There's ethos, that appeals to emotion. And then there's pathos, that basically is, or ethos is more or less ethics, appeals to a character's ethics. Pathos is more or less that pathetic appeal that appeals to emotion. So you want to sort of keep these three in mind, because every great debate, every great lawyer, every great speaker deals with logos, ethos, and pathos. And when you're writing a persuasive essay, it's no different. You want to try to integrate all three of those into your particular topic if possible. If you can integrate all three of those and talk to your audience based on logos, ethos, and pathos, and your argument or your persuasion sounds good, meaning you can back it up with facts, you can back it up with statements, you can back it up with secondary sources if need be, then you have your audience more or less that will lean toward that particular persuasion. So that's always a good thing to do if you're able to get that across. Sometimes you have to pick one or the other. But again, if you can get all three into a position where you can let all three work for you instead of against you when writing this particular essay, you'll be in a good position. If you look, there are particular let me see if I can get out of this now. There are particular, if you go down, let's see. Let me see if I can turn this off now. Bear with me. This thing here. I want to escape all this stuff. And now it's not letting me do it. Fun, right? Let's see. I will stop sharing here for a minute and get off of this and come back. Microsoft Word, you gotta love it. Microsoft Teams. So let's do it this way, I guess. Make it a little easier for me. Hold on just 1 second. Little snapperoo here. Technology. All right. So we're back here again. So notice, great writers, great speakers, Martin Luther King, like I said, any type, religious speakers, politicians, presidents. If you study those, if you study their techniques, they're basically, getting into the persuasive avenue here. So, when you set out to persuade someone, you want them to accept your opinion on an issue. You want to change the person's mind to your way of thinking. So you're going to have to use, the logos, the ethos, the pathos to be able to do that effectively. So this means that you need to be very aware of your audience. Well, who's your audience? Well, in this case, it's going to be me, because I'm basically grading your work. But at the same time, think of maybe a universal audience to sort of keep in mind. Maybe think of, the peers in your class. Maybe think of people, neighbors, or people around in your community. More likely, if you can, appeal to a universal audience, most great speakers, most great debaters, they usually appeal to that universal audience more so than select a few. But of course, you do see, certain politicians, sometimes they appeal only to their base. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, because you're only appealing to the people that you know they're going to come out to vote for you. But at the same time, you want as many people to come out to vote for you. So you want people from all shapes and sizes of life to be able to get all your votes. So this means that you need to be very wary audience. You want to be forging a link with them by establishing a common goal, not irritating them by completely ignoring their needs. So you want to sort of kind of keep that in mind. You don't want to, disrespect or talk down to your particular audience if you want them to sort of buy into what you're trying to sell. You're sort of like a lawyer on paper, or you're sort of like a salesperson on paper. You're trying to sell your audience your belief. You're trying to sell them, a product. You're trying to sell them a concept. They have to buy into it to be able to get your support. If they can't buy into it, or you talk down to them like they're, less intelligent than you are, whatever the case may be, then you're not going to be able to win them over when it comes to persuading them on your particular point of view. You're just not going to be able to do it. That's why a lot of elections are won and lost by how well the character of the particular politician is. Are they truthful? Are they honest? Do they sort of relate to me in some fashion or way? Do they know how to meet my needs? Do they even know what my needs are? Right? I mean, if you can't address certain things, how can you persuade somebody to believe in what you're trying to sell them to make it better if you can't address what's hurting them the most? So just be wary of that. Be careful. There are 3 areas you should try to attempt to appeal to when trying to get your audience on your side. Appeal to reason. Most people believe themselves to be reasonable, so appealing to a person's sense of reason is the most effective means of convincing them to change their way of thinking. If we don't do this, then, right, appeal to character. We all share certain common areas of what is just and fair. Appealing your audience sense of what is right and fair can be a powerful persuasive device. For example, like you, I share a sense of horror and repulsion at what is happening. That's just an example phrasing. Appeal to emotions. Persuasion often succeeds by carefully and considering use of emotion, especially showing how passionate you feel for your point of view. So in a lot of ways, this is logos, this is ethos, this is pathos, going back to Aristotle days, right? This stuff is transcend through the Greeks. It's 21st century now, and we're still talking about the rhetorical appeals. Why? Because they work. Any type of debate that's really well presented, any type of politician that's out trying to sell or try to gain money or a vote, any type of advertisement, any type of persuasive writing deals with these particular rhetorical appeals. If you can't use these in your particular essay, if you can't find a way to appeal to reason, appeal to character, appeal to emotions, then one, either you need to find a different topic that you can sort of fit all these into, or you need to really do some brainstorming and maybe make an outline, because for whatever reason, whatever you're doing it's not going to persuade anybody. So just be wary of that. Appeal to reason. Recognize that your audience feel that they hold a reasonable view already, but try to dissuade that view by showing how much more reasonable your position is. Provide evidence to support your ideas to suggest that they are reasonable and logical. However, because you are being persuasive and not writing to argue, you do not have to provide entirely neutral facts. So this is where you can kind of come in and be a little bit biased, because it is on your particular point of view. Don't feel like you have to go out and get secondary research for this. I mean, if you do, you want to make sure that you know how to document it correctly via MLA. If you need help with that, then you need to start sending me drafts and highlighting the parts that you are using from secondary sources. This, in some ways, this particular persuasive essay is getting you ready for the argumentative research paper, which is to come in the following month. But don't feel like you need to go out and document sources. If you do, you need, like I said, you need to cite them in text or parenthetically, and you need to provide a works cited page, because nobody wants to get flagged for plagiarism. The first offense of that is going to be a 0 on the assignment. That 0 will drop you at least 2 letter grades, if not more. And the second offense, if you're foolish enough to do it again, then you're just going to fail the class. And then you have to go before a board, and they determine whether they suspend you for a couple semesters, a year, or they just flat out kick you out from this college for good. So if you have questions about, are you citing stuff correctly, if you're planning on using secondary sources, then you need to ask me, you need to ask Smart Thinking, you need to visit a library to ask the librarian, they can help you. Whatever you do, just don't plagiarize the paper, because turn it in and Safe Assign, which are the plagiarizing tools that the college use, 99.9% accurate, and they will catch you. If it's out there and you can find it, guess what? The program can find it and I can find it. So it's not really a smart way to go plagiarize. Because nobody at this point, especially being that this is midterm week, meaning we give or take have about 2 months left in the semester, less than 8 weeks. Getting a 0 or getting multiple zeros from here on out is just basically going to wreck your grade. So I wouldn't suggest, causing academic suicide to your GPA at this point. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to withdraw from the class or take the grade, whatever it is, come December. And if it's not, passing, which most programs that study want you to have a C or higher, whether you're transferring or staying in the program or going to another college, whatever the case may be. These particular English classes, you need at least a 70 or higher to get in, and some of these other classes, because they require a requirement for this stuff, requisite. So just be careful of that. Again, appeal to reason. If you look here, there is a little example. Every year, hundreds of thousands of calves like this one are separated from their mothers within days of birth. This is a fact. It can be tested. However, it's also still very emotive. Why? Well, because, think about calves, younglings, babies being separated from mothers. You can kind of fit this with mothers and babies in the human world. So you can appeal that. Again, going back to this appeal to reason. So an effective way of appealing to your audience sense of reason while still presenting your view as the only correct view is to use emotional facts or emotive facts rather than objective ones. How can we make facts emotive? However, you do not want to overuse this, as it makes you seem untrustworthy and insincere. So you want to be careful about using the emotion here. You don't want to go too extreme, but at the same time, you want to have just enough to make your point across. It's sort of like putting too much sugar in your coffee. Too much will ruin it. Too little will, not give it that kick that you need. But if you put too much in, it's really going to be, basically brown syrup. So what's the use at that point? Again, here's another example. You work for the Vegetarian Society. You are trying to persuade people that turkey farming is cruel, right? See if you can improve the following facts by making them more emotive. So here they give you an example. It says approximately 10 million turkeys are killed in November through December, and the wild turkeys could live up to 10 years. Farm turkeys are usually killed between the ages of 12 and 26 weeks. So you would want to, if you're a part of this particular society, and you wanted to persuade somebody to, hey, let's try to save these turkeys, then you would go into a, series of paragraphs, series of statements backing up why you want to try to save these turkeys, using logos, ethos, and pathos. Appeal to character, right? This is really getting more or less into the ethos. You need to try to convince your audience that you and they are very similar, sharing parallel ideas and views. One way to do this is create a sense of shared personal cultural experiences. That's why when you hear a lot of debaters or a lot of politicians, they try to say, well, I grew up on a farm, or I used to live in New York City, or, I went to this particular school or played football. They try to appeal to you in a way that, they can kind of be similar to you, or sort of walk in your shoes to some degree and say, I walked sort of the same path as you did. I just, I'm at this point now in the community where I can make some change. Only thing I need to do is ask for your vote or ask for your money, or I can appeal to you because I'm trustworthy. I come from the sort of the same neighborhood or the same community as you do. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on the speaker and who's the one directing that speech. That's what Abraham Lincoln kind of did. It says here, why wouldn't this speech have been as effective at an equals right rally in France? Well, again, this is talking about Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln, he's wanting to try to help free the slaves here. It wouldn't work so well in France because it wasn't a problem in France. It was a problem in America. So that's why this particular speech, had Lincoln gave it, to a group of French women and men and children, it wouldn't get the same effect because it was overseas and not directed to the people that needed to be directed to, which were the domesticated people here at home. So again, that's knowing your audience, knowing where to give a speech or where to write a particular piece to persuade a group or a community of people. The other thing is that you can use as it relates to appealing to character, using the ethos, is one way to make your audience feel as though they have shared experiences with you is to include anecdotes, which is little small stories. These illustrative real stories add a human and personal dimension that can be irresistible and fascinating. You want to be careful though, because again, this is a persuasive particular paper. We're not going back to writing a narrative or writing description. You can definitely use little, short pieces or flash fiction type deals with your anecdotes. You can describe stuff, but you want to be careful that you're not really that you're focusing on persuading your audience. You're writing a persuasive essay. You're not writing another narrative or another descriptive or a cause and effect or whatever the case may be at this point. So you want to be careful that you're not turning this persuasive essay into a whole nother narrative. Anecdotes are really short and sweet. Think of flash fiction. If you read fiction, they're pretty short and sweet in their own right. So you want something that will, like it says here, it could be personal, maybe similar, maybe somebody went through a similar experience. It could be fascinating, but you want it to be sort of short, sweet, and to the point. You don't want to go and belabor it for 3 pages and think that you're writing a persuasive paper. The only thing you're doing is extending that anecdote, which is basically just doing a whole nother narrative essay, which is not what you want to do. So again, that's where smart thinking, that's where me, as it relates to drafts, would come in. So please take advantage of that before the thing is due, or before I sit down and grade it. I can help folks before I actually put a grade on something. After I put a grade on something, it's done with, right? You should have got the help when you had the chance. You have weeks. You had several weeks before to really get started with these drafts. Again, going to your ethos, be respectful. You want to use an appropriate tone to suit your audience and purpose. If you go out, let's just say hypothetically, if you go out yelling and screaming and cussing at somebody, chances are you're not going to get what you want out of them. They're going to shut down, right? You've already put them in a defensive mode. They're going to want to shout, yell, and cuss you back. That's why you don't hear a lot of politicians go out and cuss people, or you don't hear a lot of politicians go out there and just start pounding their fist on the table and yelling and say, "Hey, you should vote for me because I'm the only candidate who can actually get you out of this mess. And if you don't, you're X, Y, and Z." They don't do that because they know if they go out swinging at potential voters, at potential donors who can support them, via money, that they're going to lose those people quick. And the same thing is, on paper. You don't want to go out there and start, cussing people out and yelling and saying somebody's stupid or whatever the case may be, because you're never going to be able to persuade anybody if you cut them down. They're just going to tune you off, and they're going to go over to the next person to see what they're trying to sell them. That's why you don't hear too many. Another good example would be a car salesman. When you go look for a car, whether it's a new or used car, not too many car salesmen are going to get up there and say, "Hey, you're pretty damn stupid if you don't buy this car." They're not gonna say that. They're going to try to persuade you. This is why you need to buy this car over that car, or this is why you need to stay with this dealership over that dealership. They're going to try to, one, they want to make company or money for the overall company. Two, they want to make some kind of commission. And the only way they're going to make commission is if they make that sale. So they're going to try to treat you as respectful, as generous, and modest as possible. So if you look here, generous, people often put their own interests first. What can you offer your readers to help them change their mind, right? Be modest. No one will listen to an arrogant, impolite big head. So again, yes. I mean, if you have somebody at a used car lot or at a, let's say, Toyota place, and they're being obnoxious about, "Hey, you really need to buy this," but they're not really telling you why, then chances are you're probably going to go down the road, you're going to try to find another salesman, or you're going to complain, or whatever the case may be. But hopefully you're not going to buy the car just because they're yelling at you and telling you, "Hey, this is a great deal." Well, why is it a great deal? What do you know about the car that I don't know about the car? How are you going to sell it? I mean, yes, price does matter. The amount, how much gas I get, out of the mileage matters as well too. But if you can't sell me on other aspects, if you're just going to cuss me out because I don't want to buy this particular car, maybe I don't like the color. I mean, again, you're not gonna get customers. That's the same way if you work in retail or the restaurant business. A lot of y'all probably do or have done that. It's hard work because you're having to try to please everybody. You're having to try to please the people you work with. You're having to try to please your boss. You're having to try to please your customers. Because nobody likes to have a rude customer, whether you're serving steak or whether you're, folding clothes or checking out eggs. A rude customer to come in bright and early or whatever time that you open up and go into your particular work and just go off for the sake of going off because they think they're entitled and they have the privilege to do that. It ruins the day. And I mean, even if you felt like you were being threatened or had the right to sort of comment back, depending on how you approach that, and your tone could be whether you kept your job or not. Because usually those people they're able to dish it out, but they're not necessarily able to take it back. So they usually run the corporate or somebody, and you know how that goes. So just be careful when you're doing that on paper, though. You don't want to do the same thing that you don't want somebody to come to your work to do to you on paper. You don't want them to basically be rude. Another thing is you want to be personal. Persuasion works best when you know your audience well. So consider your reader. Think about what their current views are and what has brought them to think that way. Think about addressing them as a friend, using the pronoun you. You want to be careful about you because I've talked about this in the last several essays that you have written. Generally, you is AKA second person. You want to try to avoid using second person pronouns, you, your, yourself, in academic, formal, professional writing. There are places for it. If you're quoting, say, something from secondary material, journal article, book, internet, something of that nature, and you put quotation marks because they're using the pronoun, that's one way that you can kind of get away from using it. If you're doing like a short fiction type deal and you have characters that are speaking in second person, you can go about it that way. You want to be careful not to overuse it. It's like using the pronoun I. You want to be careful that you're not overusing that. You can use it in certain areas. Most of you should have used it with the narrative essay. Here, depending on your circumstance, you can use the second person if you're trying to be personal about it and trying to grab into your audience. But you don't want to have every single sentence of every paragraph in your particular 5-page paper, let's say, with that pronoun. You want to try to use third person pronouns to sort of keep it neutral to some degree. And the reason why I'm saying you want to sort of kind of keep using third person pronouns at this point is when we get into the research paper, you want to be more or less objective and not subjective. This paper, you can be a little bit more subjective if you want. If you think using a you here or there would appeal to the personality of being personal to your audience, then by all means use it. Just don't overdo it. It's like again, going back to the whole coffee and sugar analogy. If you put 50 packs of sugar into your cup and you only have a little bit of coffee, you're basically just giving me syrup, right? The same thing. You want to be personal to a degree, but you don't want to overly personalize this because that would get more and more into the realm of a personal narrative, and we're not trying to do a narrative. We're trying to be persuasive here. You're trying to persuade me, your audience, to believe in whatever the topic you chose. You're trying to persuade me in your belief or your opinion or your way. Why is your way better? Well, okay, X, Y, and Z. Well, prove it to me. Persuade me to believe in your way of thinking. You want to be concerned and show that you share your readers' concerns, even if your views are different. We can agree to disagree, right? You heard that saying before. A lot of times, good debates, a lot of good persuasive arguments, speeches, they have that characterization, agree to disagree. You can do so and be constructive about it without being rude, right? Going back to, again, you don't want to sit here and basically yell and cuss at your potential audience who could be persuaded to think and believe your way of things, right? You don't want to shut people down the first paragraph. It's like going to the movies, right? You watch the 30-second trailer or teaser, you waited through the 15 minutes or whatever it is of commercials. You spent, $40 or whatever, depending on how many people you brought with you. But you wanted the popcorn, you wanted the whole deal. So you spent all that, and you finally sit down, and the first 10 minutes of the movie is nothing what the trailer or the teaser tried to persuade you on. They hook you in on 30 seconds of this or that. But you soon realize within those first 5 or 10 minutes, this movie is just going to be dried, and it's just not going to be what I'm, interested in the next 2 hours. By then, you're already committed. What do? You sit and sort of gut it out, eat the bad, stale popcorn, or do you get up and walk out? And chances are they're probably not going to give you a refund, at least not for, the food that you've already consumed. So more likely what you're going to do is sit down and watch it and bear it and grin it and say, hey, I'm not going to do that again until the next one comes out and you do it again. So again, you want to be careful. You don't want to lose folks the first 5 or 10 lines into your particular persuasive essay. You want to sort of hit them strong with, hey, this is the reasons. This is why you should, do X, Y, or Z. And I'm going to show you why. You want to be truthful. You want to be honest. You want to use logic. You don't want to send folks off into, 1,000 different directions to try to find out what your main point or what your main idea is, aka your thesis. So you really need to have a strong persuasive thesis. Very last sentence of that introduction paragraph to set the direction and the tone for the remainder of your paper. If you don't have that, you don't have much of a persuasive paper going on. You're writing for the sake of, hey, I got to get something in because I need a grade. Well, if you're thinking that way, you're not persuading anybody. And chances are you're writing to nowhere and your grade is not going to go up. It's going to go down. So be careful of that. Appeal to emotions, right? We're looking at ethos now, or pathos rather. The pathetic appeal, as you might hear it in other places. The most important persuasive technique is to sound authentic, right? You don't want to sound phony or fake. If you sound phony or fake, most people can tell if you're phony or fake, or if you're prone to lying a lot, they can usually tell. Folks like to read people. And if they can read that there's something sort of not right about you, then they're not going to be 100%, wanting to support you in whatever you try to, persuade them to for you to do. You're not going to be wanting to give up your hard-paying money from your back pocket. You're not going to be wanting to go to the polls. You're not going to want to be, support this particular project or this particular movie or this, particular music, whatever the case may be. If you're a phony, you're just not going to want to do it. You want to be passionate as you really mean what you say. This requires a confident tone. So you need to be confident, sound like you are sincere and believable. So what tends to happen to our vocabulary choices when we talk about something we are passionate about? You start opening your game a little bit when it comes to that, because you know that particular field or that particular area that you're passionate about. You're able to talk about it, authentically, truthfully. Words start to flow. You know what to say because you know the lingo in that particular area. You're not having to search the internet or dictionary to find words that sort of describe what you're trying to get across. You just know it like the back of your hand. And people can tell that you're passionate about your particular area that you're trying to persuade, product that you're trying to sell. So think about that when you're actually looking at some of these topic choices too. You want to sort of maybe pick a topic that you already have some passion or some knowledge about. Make the whole process of drafting it a lot easier. It won't feel like it's, taking trash out because you want to watch the football game, but somebody's telling you, hey, you got to take the trash out. It's overflowing. But you don't want to do that. Why? Well, because taking the trash out is not appealing, right? Again, appealing. Sometimes you got to be persuaded to, take the trash out. If you do this, I will do that. Get this for that deal. Quid pro quo is another one, I guess, of some of these fallacies that we may get into at some point. Logical fallacies. You can kind of look up and do a Google search on those, because those are things that you might want to use or try to avoid as well, depending on what your topic is. Again, going back to the pathos, some words have connotations that evoke emotional response. Consider the difference between the words building, house, and home. Right? There is a difference there, house and home. Right? Do you live in a house or do you live in a home? Do you want a job or do you want a career? See, there's different meanings of the words. The words all come from the same semantic field, similar to denotations. However, the connotations of words are very different because we often have an emotional association to words. Our choice of vocabulary can be a powerful tool for persuasion, depending on what you choose for your words. You can use words to make our audience feel guilty about a situation, angry, and even hopeful. So again, this might be where the dictionary and the source comes into play. You have all of that at your fingertips. There's a built-in dictionary and thesaurus in your Microsoft Word, depending on the version of Word. If you're using a desktop version, it's there. There should be a free version, maybe with the cloud Office 365 version. Even if you don't want to fool with the Word version of it, you can go to Google and type in thesaurus or dictionary, and you have bukus of pages that have free thesauruses and dictionaries that you can, pick your best one and see what words that you can use to persuade folks. If you're sort of using the same words over and over again, you want to sort of spice that up, And look at, antonyms and synonyms. Look at different things. Don't use the same words. Eventually, the repetition is good to some degree, but over time, it's recycled. It gets old. It's like beating the dead horse. You don't want to hear the same record 30 times in a span of, a couple minutes. At least most people don't. They want something different. They want change. They want spice. They want variety. So as you can tell here is, different things. It says here, improve at least 4 of these headlines by making, so this is just more or less like a exercise. Old man hit by robbers, 100 peasants killed by troops, train seats cut by teenagers, house prices fall through the country, shortage of money creates problems in schools, trouble on roads after snow falls, player hits referee. So again, this is basically wanting you to use certain words to sort of build up the emotion of these particular headlines if you were going to go that way. It says you have to persuade the overworked customer service assistant at your local department store to refund or exchange your unwanted Christmas present. So again, you want to, if you're going to, let's say, your local mall, of course, those are being sort of, basically non-existent anymore. Brunswick still has one, but it seems like tumbleweeds just sort of roll through it. But around Christmas time, you do have folks out there sometimes that you pay them a fee and they will wrap your gift or whatever. But let's say it was a Belk's. I think that's the only place that's really open there, shopping center wise. There's a couple other ones maybe inside, but let's say you're trying to go back and exchange or refund, right, your particular unwanted Christmas gift. How are you going to persuade that particular person that's probably been working there for 8, 10, 12 hours? Probably have already dealt with about 20 or 30 of you, similar people like you coming back and exchanging the gifts for money or whatever the case may be. By the time you get there, they're probably kind of agitated and tired. How are you going to persuade them to take one more gift, right? And the way that you approach it will probably be the way that, you either get a refund or you get credit or you get the ability to go back and exchange it for something of, equal value, whatever the case may be. So just make sure that, you make your point. The distinction between writing to persuade and writing to argue is incredibly subtle. In both cases, you need to present a support written argument. What is the difference when you're writing to persuade? In any form of argumentation writing, you need to make sure that your points are clearly stated and well developed. Again, this is going to be sort of a segue into the research paper, because there you're going to be doing a little bit more argumentative examples than trying to do a persuasive particular paper. The point is clearly stated, but it lacks details. Without these details, the writers will fail to convince their audience. So if you look here, it says, I think that animals should have the same rights as human beings. Okay, so what? You need some kind of support, right? And this would be where you would go out possibly to the library, use Galileo, the databases, that type deal, to find secondary scholarly material that you can use to back up your support. How to make an effective point: introduce it, explain it, justify it, drive it home. Right? This right here can easily be, 2 sentences, 2 sentences, 2 sentences, 2 sentences. Before you're done with all that, you have an 8-sentence paragraph. If you're worried about how in the heck you're going to get, 1,250 words or 5 pages or whatever, if you sort of approach it that way and have 8-sentence paragraphs and double space and use the appropriate MLA format, then you should have no problem meeting your page length or your word count. It's when you start writing these short, really choppy sentences that don't really, have these 4 attributes in them, that's where you start to, one, lose your audience, because you're not going to persuade anybody if you just introduce it and then sort of drive it home because you missed these, explain it and justify. You don't buy a hamburger just for the lettuce, tomato, and cheese, right? You buy the hamburger for everything involved. You buy the hamburger for the top bun, for the bottom bun, for the lettuce, for the onions, for the pickles, for the mayonnaise, for the ketchup, for the cheese, for the patties. Same thing with a paragraph. I don't want to have a paragraph that doesn't have a bun on it. What's the point? Right? You didn't introduce anything. I don't want to have a paragraph that lacks the cheese and the meat. Well, that's explain it and justify it. You're just giving me 2 pieces of bread. It's basically like a paragraph. It's basically air in the middle. There's nothing there to eat. There's nothing there for me to chew. There's nothing there for me to be persuaded one way or the other. You might as well just gave me air and nothing on nothing on the particular piece of paper. Or you might as well just say, hey, I'm just going to give you 2 buns. I'm going to give you the top bun and the bottom bun. Nothing else. Well, that's not really advertising. Why do I pay $7 for this? Got you though, didn't I? You thought you were getting one thing, but you got something else, and we still got your money. That's not very, ethically. That's not being very, truthful. That's not being helpful. If you build people up with the hype, but you don't deliver the hype, then you're not going to persuade them. They're not going to want to come back, let's say, to that restaurant and buy that particular hamburger or whatever you're trying to sell them. They're just not going to come back. And then, now with the internet and phones and everything, YouTube, you can instantaneously, ruin somebody's restaurant by just giving them a bad review and have, a couple people on TikTok take that off and make it viral. By the end of the day, that place could be, ready to close down because your story got out there. You made an appeal or persuasion to, hey, let's boycott this place because of X, Y, and Z. Well, depending on how established that place is, if it's a mom and pop shop, they can be shutting down doors in 2 days, right? If it's a big chain place, well, they're going to take a hit, and they could be closing in that particular location over time, especially if nobody's going. If you don't have customers coming in your door on a daily basis, and a lot of them, you're going to lose revenue. You're going to lose money, and at some point that place goes down because you can't afford to keep it open. You can't afford the bills. You can't afford paying your employees because there's nobody there to serve. So be careful of that. Introduce your point. You want to use a clear statement. You can afford to be general rather than specific at this stage, but you want to be careful, right? Explain your point. Restate your point in more detail. Be more specific. This is the in other words stage of your point. Justify your point. Give reasons. Remind people how they might behave in similar situations. Provide evidence. This again may be where you use personal, because you can be a little bit biased with a persuasive paper, or you might want to go out and find secondary scholarly information that will be helpful to back up your points. Now be careful. Wikipedia is not a scholarly article or websites. You want to be careful about .com stuff. If you're using stuff off the internet, you want to find stuff that is .edu, .org, or .gov. That's usually the more reputable sites. That's not to say that everything .com won't be, credible, but you want to be careful. Wikipedia is something that you don't want to use. You can go there to, understand a main point. Maybe you can go there to get, information. The best thing about Wikipedia, if the article is well written, if you scroll down to their references, usually there's hyperlinks, there's books, there's articles that go to scholarly places. You can piggyback maybe off of that, but just to copy and paste or use something from Wikipedia, that's a little bit more difficult to chew, because anybody that knows how to use a computer to edit, to spell, to type, to copy and paste, they can, go up there anytime, day or night, and present something or publish something, and you don't know how truthful it is. So that's the reason why Wikipedia is not good when it comes to using other people's ideas from those particular articles, because you just don't know who wrote it. It could be a 7-year-old. It could be a 97-year-old. It could be somebody with a PhD and somebody that was a high school dropout. I mean, you just don't know. You can't verify it. So you want to be careful. What evidence, right? Stats, facts, witness testimony, expert opinion, a quotation, an example, anecdote, again, little short story. Use logic or logos. Drive your point home. Sound confident. Certainly, the fact is that there is no doubt that clearly these are some transitional words that you could possibly use throughout your paragraphs. Use poetic and descriptive techniques such as alliteration. The good news is that greet is good. So you look here, G, G, G. A lot of times the listener likes to hear stuff that sort of rhymes, that goes together like that. Generalize, focus away from specific details onto general truths. After all, surely we all want to be accepted. A little example there. Again, to drive your point home, maybe end on a question to make the reader think. Think for a moment. Wouldn't you be happier if everything in life was this simple? Yes, we all would like to have a simple life at this point, I'm sure. But have fun with it. Again, like I said, you're sort of like a lawyer on paper. But you're wanting to persuade your particular audience and to persuade in a way that they're buying what you are trying to sell, believe, what the pro is against the con, what the problem that you're trying to solve maybe is, whatever the case may be. But have fun with it. Send drafts when you can, as often as you can, as early as you can. Use smart thinking. They're there to help you too. I mean, that's two free things there. You can send them a draft and me a draft basically at the same time. And then when you get the feedback, you can sort of combine, and sort of combine what you need to combine and get rid of what you need to get rid of. That's two sets of eyes, right? If you know people outside of the classroom, you can get, a couple sets of eyes there. You can, if you know somebody in the class, you can email them your paper and see if they want, kind of want to review what you have written. In this particular paper, you're probably not going to have so much of a peer review, just because we're getting closer and closer to that research paper. So just be, use other options. Be mindful of other things that you can use to improve your writing. Like I said, send me and Smart Thinking multiple drafts. The best way that you're going to improve your writing is by writing and by rewriting. For some, you have to send multiple drafts to be able to reach that A. For others, especially the ones that are either still in high school or just out of high school that did a lot of writing while they were in school, maybe they won't have this much, that many drafts they're having to rewrite. But somebody that's been out 10, 15, 20 years, you're probably going to have to do a period of rewriting. It's just part of the game. It's like math. You're not going to be able to master math without doing practice problems. Some of you have to do more than what's required from that particular math class, especially if you're doing something hard like difficult like calculus or trig. But you wasn't really born into a mathematical frame of mind, so you have to work on it. Like Michael Jordan, he didn't come out of the womb the greatest basketball player of all time. He had to develop that skill. Writing is a skill that you have to develop. It's a process. It just doesn't happen 6 hours before something is due. So just kind of keep that in mind. Don't beat yourself up unless you are one of those procrastinators that do wait 6 hours before something is due, right? You had 2-3 weeks to do an essay, but you're waiting 6 hours the day that it's due to do it, then you should expect that it's probably not going to be all that great. I mean, really. So just be mindful of that thing. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great midterm week. I hope everybody has a great rest of this week. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks.